All right, welcome back to the channel. So, Shawn Porter says that Keith Thurman would retire before he got in the ring with Jaron Ennis, and so would a lot of the upper top welterweights right about now. Jaron Ennis really is the man in the 147-pound to be. Let's talk about what Shawn Porter had to say about him and Jaron Ennis, and Jaron Ennis and Keith Thurman in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. So, there are ebbs and flows in life. Things go up, things come down. Things are good, then things get bad, then things get good again, then things get bad, right? So it's just the way of life, right? You're born, you age, you get to your prime, you decline, you pass away. Whatever happens after that happens after that. So in boxing is the same thing. We see young stars coming up. We see established stars ruling the roost, and we see the aging stars declining and heading towards their retirement years. What we're almost always looking for is either the young fighter that's coming up that will be the man when he gets to the prime, or she gets to their prime, that they will then take over the establishment. They will fight the established fighters and take it over, and those guys leave the sport. We've seen that time and time and time again. We saw when Manny Pacquiao was running the welterweight division along with Floyd Mayweather Jr., guys like Miguel Cotto, right, were there. And then what happens? The next generation of fighters come. Some come 1 year, then the next year they drip in until the next one is established and that last group is gone. And so now we are here in the welterweight division with Errol Spence, one of the biggest money divisions in sports, with Errol Spence Jr., Manny Pacquiao, and Terrence Crawford firmly on top of it, with Shawn Porter, Keith Thurman, Danny Garcia, Yordenis Ugas, guys like that who are contenders fighting for the belts. But now we've got a prospect who is, I believe, going to jump ahead a lot of the contenders that are there now and be willing to compete and knock off several of the champions that are there right now. It may not happen this year. It may not happen next year, but by 2022, these dudes ain't going to want no smoke with Jaron Ennis. And I believe we saw that in the Chris Van Heerden fight, except for he was just so excited. It looked to me like Jaron Ennis was just so excited that he knew he could get Chris Van Heerden out of there with absolutely no problem. He just ran at Chris Van Heerden with no regard, with complete disregard, complete disrespect of that man's abilities, and was mopping the floor with him. No way that fight was going to get out of the second round. But because he was so anxious, headbutt happened. Chris Van Heerden jumps while he's getting beat, jumps off the ropes, bang, headbutt. Chris Van Heerden gets saved by a nasty, nasty gash. And I mean saved by a nasty, nasty gash. But unfortunately, that fight was determined to be a no contest. So Jaron Ennis did not get the IBO championship belt that he would have. But I maintain that we saw enough of him in that fight to know what that guy is against that level of competition. It's just gone, right? There's no need for Jaron Ennis to fight anybody around that level anymore. It is now time for Jaron Ennis to take the Ugases, Jaron Ennis to take Delorme was supposed to be the guy to get rid of the Thomas Delormes, to get rid of that contender level. So Shawn Porter was asked, he said, look, do you think Keith Thurman would fight Jaron Ennis? And Shawn Porter said, no, I do not believe Keith Thurman would fight Jaron Ennis. I think Keith Thurman would retire before he fought Jaron Ennis. Shawn Porter said, and why did Shawn Porter believe that? Because Shawn Porter said he would do the same thing before he fought that young guy, before he fought. Now, I don't know what he thinks about Virgil Ortiz, but in this, he's specifically talking about Jaron Ennis and saying, no, I would retire before I fought that kid. Like, that is not my job. It is the next generation's job to deal with that kid, not mine. So what does that tell you that he thinks about him? He thinks that that guy is the next Errol Spence, is the next Manny Pacquiao, is the next Floyd Mayweather Jr. And when I say Floyd Mayweather Jr. and I say Errol Spence Jr., I'm not saying that I mean that he is going to be the mega financial star that Floyd Mayweather Jr. is, or that he's going to have a stadium in Dallas where 100,000 people will come in like Errol Spence Jr. Because some of that is it just has to be meant to be for you. You know, I believe that to be a mega star, it really has to be in the cards for you, and that you'll be that, and almost nobody's going to be able to stop the people that are supposed to be that from getting that. I don't think that there was too much of anything people could have done, even though they didn't bring up Muhammad Ali and think, oh yeah, this guy's going to be this great big star. Maybe they did. Obviously I wasn't alive at that time, but he became what he was going to be because that's what his goal, that's what his destiny is. Errol Spence Jr., you can't make people be born in Dallas, Texas with 100,000, 120,000 person stadium right next to him. You just can't, right? That has to be there for them because that is a major part of what makes Errol Spence Jr. a star is where he's from, right? And the support that he gets that brings in the money. What I'm talking about with Jaron Ennis is not the money. What I'm talking about with Jaron Ennis is not the fame. What I'm talking about with Jaron Ennis is the Bernard Hopkins, right? What I'm talking about with Jaron Ennis is that dude who is that marvelous Marvin Hagler type of scenario where this guy is going to, he may not have a bunch, like a whole country of people screaming for him, coming up out of Philadelphia, right? Not getting a ton of press, but when you get in the ring with him, I think you're going to see that this dude has everything, and those hype jobs that you put in front of him are going to fall, right? So what could happen with Jaron Ennis, and this is why I'm talking about him so early in his career, and I'm talking about him so just out like this, right? Because people need to know that Jaron Ennis is for real, okay? People need to know Jaron Ennis is for real, that he's for real early. Because if the mainstream boxing, if the mainstream boxing does not talk and recognize Jaron Ennis, what's going to happen to Jaron Ennis is that the media is going to do him wrong. And what they're going to do is they're going to act like they don't know who he is, right? They're going to have a whole bunch of people not fighting him, refusing to fight him. And then because the guys that they want to get ahead, right, they will just act like it's Jaron Ennis trying not to make the fights. Like Gary Russell Jr. Look what's going on with Gary Russell Jr. at 126 pounds. You have Mike Coppinger with a straight face saying he thinks that Josh Warrington is the number 126 pounder in the world. When Mike Coppinger and everybody that knows Mike Coppinger knows that Gary Russell Jr. will beat the brakes off of Josh Warrington. And Josh Warrington wants no smoke with that man whatsoever. But yet, he's the top guy. Why? Because he won't fight Gary Russell Jr. Josh Warrington would be the top 126. Why? Because Leo Santa Cruz wouldn't fight Gary Russell Jr. and Gary never had an opportunity to beat him. Right? What's the argument that Josh Warrington's the top 126? Oh, because Gary Russell Jr. didn't get a fight with Oscar Valdez. Right? We don't know what he is. We're just looking at the eye test because who has he beaten? He hasn't beaten Oscar Valdez. He didn't beat Shakur Stevenson. He didn't beat these guys. What other champions at 126 has he beaten? They won't fight him. And you, the media people, are acting like they don't have to fight him. So why would they fight him? As much as you guys want to get, as you say, I get on your nerves from what I'm doing and the things that I'm saying, at least I'm asking fighters to fight each other. You guys sit up there and hide behind. Canelo Alvarez just got done fighting a tin can, and he's about to move on to a beer can, to an aluminum beer can. And after he beats that aluminum beer can, he's gonna kick a glass bottle down the street. His best fight is Jermall Charlo, and you're not calling for it at all. And you ridicule people that ask for it. So that's what I see gonna go on with Jaron Ennis, and that's why I'm talking about him early. No, that dude is one of the best 147 pounds right now. So when you bring up your Josh Warrington, when you bring up Josh Taylor into 147, and you bring up Teofimo Lopez into 147, and you bring Josh Taylor into 147, and he's there, do not sit around and act like you don't know who he is, and you don't know who he fought, and we don't get it, and he don't deserve the fight, because these guys are the real ones. So if you want to know why I'm pushing Jaron Ennis early, it's because I see what's going on with Top Rank, and they're going to be moving those guys into 147, and Jaron Ennis will beat the brakes off of Josh Taylor. Jaron Ennis will beat the brakes off of Jose Ramirez. He will beat the brakes off these dudes. And when they go to 147, they're not going to want to fight him, and they're going to try to find an excuse for why not. And the reason why not is going to be nobody knows him. He doesn't sell any tickets. What does he do? He's boring. All the while, the fighters that they say are the best, they're going to land up, they're going to go to the local garbage can, grab as many containers up out of them, and line them up for their fighters to kick them down the street. And that is what happens in boxing year in and year out. It's not my imagination. If you do not believe me, wait and see. Let me know what you think in the comments section. Thank you so much for coming to the channel. And with that, I'm out. Peace.